what's always exciting is, with the work of the Sloan Foundation, to hear a bit about the genesis of these projects. For Sweet Potatoes and To Dust, I'm kind of curious, what was the genesis? Was it the idea of your film or learning about Sloan Foundation as a catalyst to create your stories? Rebel, would you like to begin a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier today, I'm originally from Bolivia, and I came in 6 years ago just to go to film school. And I remember that when I arrived here to the U.S. and I took a taxi on my way to my apartment, the taxi driver asked me where I was from, and I said I'm from Bolivia, and then he asked me if I had cocaine in my backpack. And I was like, wow, that's, I guess, a joke, but he kept asking me all these cocaine and drug-related questions, and it was funny, but then uncomfortable, and then I was like, well, I guess that's my welcome to America, you know, in a way. So it was a little sad to hear, like, this, I guess, the stereotypes, and that's just like the first example of many, you know, that existed. And throughout my stay at USC, I kept, like, it kept hitting me, the whole, like, stereotypes and feeling like, as a Bolivian filmmaker, I was seen as the one who knows about drugs, or that is into narcos, or like, or that is an expert in hiking, you know, which I'm not very good even, by the way. But that kind of like encouraged me to look for stories, inspiring stories about Latinos, Latinx people that with their work revolutionize the world that we live in, you know. And I found a list of a lot of remarkable people, and the one that drew me the most was the story of Luis Miramontes, which is kind of like the origin of Sweet Potatoes, you know. So I connected to it in a very deep personal level, and he was like a person who truly revolutionized the world, you know. So I kind of like wrote the story, but I didn't know what to do about it. And as I continued my journey at USC, I learned about the Sloan Foundation and the grants that they offered, and I thought, wow, it was just perfect, you know, to see that they supported these kind of stories, because I wanted to focus more on the humanity behind these scientists, you know, and Sloan was like perfect for it. So it worked out beautifully.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, as a Colombian, I can actually relate, because every time anybody learns that I'm Colombian, that's his first question too. Oh, how's the cocaine? It's horrible. Come up with better jokes, people. Okay, but I think this is actually kind of really cool, because it's a perfect example of the two different types of approaches. To Dust was solely born from Sloan. Sean Snyder, who is the director and the co-writer for the film, we were actually working on a different thesis feature for him when he decided to entertain a meeting at NYU where they were discussing the Sloan production grant, the $100,000 feature production grant. And I remember I was living here in LA, and he had just come out of the meeting. He was waiting for the subway, and he calls me up, and he was just saying, you know, I'm heard about this really cool thing. It has to be a science-based idea. And so just over the phone, he just kind of started to talk to me, you know, like just thinking out loud, what is the, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna go ahead and take up this challenge, I'm gonna find, you know, something that resonates personally with me in an emotional way that has some sort of scientific question. And Sean is a Reformed Jew. It comes from a Reformed Jewish background. He had lost his mother to cancer a number of years prior. And in the Jewish tradition, there's usually a designated sort of timetable for grief. And that kind of sort of thing really got him sort of thinking about the different stages of, you know, if I'm at 7 days in my grieving process, well, where's my mom's body at that point in her decomposition process? Sean always felt that, you know, he feels his mother in his life and in his work and his daughter, but every time he was standing over her grave, all he could think about was, what does she look like right now? So it was really born of that question. And in our film, the protagonist is Jewish, but he's a Hasidic Jew, which just kind of intensified. For him, it was, a big component was what question might hold some sort of existential crisis, there. And for Shmuel, the character, to question what's happening to his wife's decay, like poses like serious risks to himself in terms of his standing in the community, because any kind of inquiry of that kind is just completely blasphemous, for lack of a better word. So that was the initial drama that sort of inspired that. That was the kernel, the seed, and I think it's really awesome that Sloan, the way that particular grant is designed, was really helpful in just kind of pushing us to develop that script based right just solely from that little kernel of an idea.
And just so we can kind of date it, when did this happen? When was the genesis of that idea?
Ooh, that's a great question. I want to say that was 2013 or 14, I think, when it first started, yeah.
And Rommel, when did you start writing your script?
2018.
Great. And Jason, if you could talk a little bit more about the writing process and the co-writing process between you and Sean now that you had this kernel of idea. How long did it take to get to kind of a script that you felt was ready to go into production?
Well, the great thing is that the grant for the NYU 100 grant thing has like a whole process where you have to like submit first a treatment, and then you think it's been a while, guys, so I can't remember exactly. Some of you who won it can maybe correct me, but I feel like it's the treatment, maybe there's an outline, but there's all these sort of due dates, and it's great because it puts the fire under your butt to like deliver. But in terms of the process of writing, like this is, again, I think one of the exciting things about Sloan is really challenging yourself. As writers, I think you're always trying to sort of, you're thinking about the drama of the story and the characters' arcs and these things. And when we were dealing with this man and his grief and the composition of his body, like you sometimes feel like you want to maybe take shortcuts in the narrative to serve your story or what you think the character needs. But when you're dealing with science, you can't really kind of fudge the facts. So I think that was something that was really cool about the process, was just constantly sort of challenging ourselves, knowing what the characters needed to kind of go, but always, staying stringent to whatever the science dictated. Sean, in particular, was the one who got to work with Donnie. I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. Stedsman, I believe. She was the head of the Kentucky body farm, which we, by the way, didn't even know what a body farm was. Like, this is the cool thing about Sloan. Like, I didn't know what a body farm was. Sean and I don't have a single like scientific bone in our bodies, but we're immensely curious people. So. It was really cool to just kind of like dive into this science that also we didn't realize was actually kind of very new, because the science of decomposition is mostly just limited to criminal forensic anthropology, that kind of stuff. Nobody's really, what happens to a body when it's 6 feet under, away from the elements in a box, with like, no one's really bothered to sort of do much of that kind of research. And when we were in the process of writing this, it was cool because there was a constant amount of like new research and developments that were happening that were completely like, we would have to sort of reassess where we were at the script and timetables and everything.
So it's interesting to hear the ideas of the body farms. It came as an evolution of the development of the script as you were going through the Sloan support process.
If To Dust is, there's this, I guess I should have like summarized what it's about, but I kind of did, right? But it's this Hasidic man who becomes obsessed with the idea of his wife, who he loses to cancer. He has these nightmares of her body decomposing, and he decides he needs to have like an understanding of like what's happening to her body. But any kind of that inquiry is a big no-no in his community, so he kind of tiptoes outside of it and enlists the help of a bumbling stoner community college professor, and they develop this unlikely friendship where they find and kill a pig and bury it out in the woods or whatever. And this idea of a Hasidic man like trying to walk into a deli to buy a pig, like that kind of like whatever childish humor, like it really didn't, it came again from the Sloan experience of like, okay, if you were going to try and find out what is it like to for a body to decompose. Well, in the course of our research, we discovered that pigs were like the best example, or at least up to that moment had been like the best example. So then suddenly we're like, oh, okay, a Hasidic man and a pig. Well, that's funny. So I mean, a lot of that sort of came from, again, just the research and yeah. I think that answers.
Only because you're talking about it now, I was very curious. Did you and Sean know the tone of the film at the start, that it would thread the line between drama and humor and have this odd couple at its forefront?
We definitely wanted to push ourselves to make it. We knew it was going to be a film about grief, and we knew it was going to be a film about decomposition, and those are like two things that people I don't think like to confront or sort of stare in the face. In fact, even when you do it with a little bit of humor, some people didn't like it. But we definitely knew that we wanted to approach, because it's also it's part of, I think, our collective humanity to be able to try and laugh in the face of tragedy. So.
Rommel, with Sweet Potatoes, I mean, you had talked about your own goal to find these untold stories that was meaningful to you. Unlike To Dust, this is based on someone very important and true to history. What was your process like in developing the script?
At first, I did research, like online research, and I read some books about the pill and the creation of it. Funny enough, I couldn't find enough information about Luis Miramontes. Like, there are a lot of people considered the founders or parents of the pill, and he was just mentioned as like in one single sentence, but in terms of learning about his family, his story, it was almost impossible to be able to find it. And I still, like, with the little that I knew, I wrote this story. What I knew was that he had like, how many? 12 to 14 siblings. And himself, he ended up having 10 children himself with his wife. But so he was very family oriented. He grew up in the countryside. I knew like minor but important things about him, and I was not happy at all with the first draft, I remember. But still, it was a starting point, 16 pages of something that seemed interesting, but not enough, in my opinion. So what I did was I kind of like tracked down his family, who is in Mexico. So I was able to talk to his son, Octavio Miramontes, who in a way followed his legacy, and is also a chemistry doctor and professor in Mexico, and the rest of his family, over there, most of his kids. So I was able to talk to them and just to have these many hour conversations regarding Luis Miramontes and the kind of father he was, the kind of scientist he was, the unfair things that happened to him. When talking to his family, I learned that for synthesizing this hormone, he got $10, and that's all he got, But the company where he worked and the director of the research, they got all the recognition, that he worked so hard to do, and he got so little in exchange. So that was heartbreaking to hear, but even more heartbreaking, what inspired me to write a new draft of a completely different story was that Luis Miramontes was a man of faith, born and raised Catholic. He was a scientist as well, so he had those struggles, of like, he's working as a scientist, and not only that, but he's working on this study that talks about like finding ways to prevent pregnancies, and we know that the Catholic Church wasn't and still isn't fully okay with it, especially not back then. So after he synthesized this, I learned that the priest, who was kind of like his best friend in the town, excommunicated him and his family because of what he had done, which affected him in such a personal level. So we're just learning all of that through his family was inspiring enough to me to write the story that I really wanted to tell, because at first, the first couple of drafts were about this young scientist who doesn't know like the right formula to synthesize this hormone, and towards the end of the film, he finds the inspiration to get it. But after talking to his family, I changed everything completely, and now the story starts with him doing the discovery, and then the story is more about the consequences of his groundbreaking invention, you know? So I think that's more, it ended up being more dramatic for sure, but exploring more the controversy behind what he did.
It's a very powerful conflict, you know,
Yeah.
to see him through that. I'm curious to know, again, now that you're working with Octavio, was Octavio your primary kind of science advisor in this, or did you work with others in development?
He was one of them because he was in Mexico. And he is still in Mexico. It was not as easy to have meetings with him. But my, let's say, other science advisor, I had like 4 maybe. But the main
You're in the
one-
right crowd to talk about all of them.
I know. The main one, her name is Lisa Arias, and she is a doctor at USC at the School of Medicine, at the Keck School of Medicine. And Lisa Raquel Arias, and she gave me actually 2-3 books about the pill, the birth control pill, and she led me through the process of how to visually accurately portray the science that is especially shown in the first few minutes, you know. With her, I learned so much about organic chemistry and how it resembles to like a very messy kitchen, much more complex kitchen, you know, where all you're doing is like cooking with these almost invisible substances and trying different things. And with her, she explained to me that the process was not like I'm going to do this in an hour, you know, but that it took days, weeks, and even months to do the whole testing purposes of things. So with her, I learned more about the hands-on science that needed to be portrayed in the film. Whereas with Octavio, who is in Mexico, it was more about how Luis Miramontes was as a scientist and what kind of clothes he would wear, what his I learned that in general you would work with many people in the lab, like assistants, but he was more of a introverted person that liked doing things on his own, you know, and that he kept like a diary where he would write about his findings, but also write a lot about how he was thinking because he was not a very outspoken person, you know. So it was like a perfect combination.
So I'm curious. I mean, Sweet Potatoes is not a documentary. It is a fiction film,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of projects I think supported by Sloan are, you know, historical biopics, et cetera. And there is going to be some creative fiction to it. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that and how you managed the relationship with Octavio, and if you could speak to that.
Okay. Well, obviously there are many fictional elements in Sweet Potatoes. I would say the main one is I'm not sure how much to spoil here, but what I'll say is that I knew from talking to him and to his family that there was this kind of like a science versus religion rivalry, you know. So in the actual life events, the priest from the town, you know, excommunicated them, but they didn't have like a best friendship relationship that we see in the story. So I would say that was kind of like the biggest fictional element because I wanted to portray in a much more emotional way the struggles that someone can have with faith, you know, and how that can affect real deep relationships that you can build, you know, with people. In this case, like Luis, who represents, let's say, the science in the film, and the priest who represents the religion of it, you know, then we have a much richer emotional journey, I felt, you know, and it gets compelling and it gets heartbreaking to a point, you know, because you see how these developments are affecting real human emotions, you know. So when talking to Octavio, I wanted to reassure him that I wanted to respect the story and his father's legacy as much as possible, but that I would also take some freedom to trying to explore things and to portray more like visual elements, you know, that would help enhance the drama in the story. He was fully on board. Him and his family, they even like watched the film, and I asked them, I was scared, to ask what they thought, but their opinion is probably one of the ones that mattered the most to me. And I remember the only feedback that I got was that the character or the actor that portrayed him, he was shorter than what his father was in real life, because his dad was like 6'2" or something, like a very tall man, and our actor was maybe about my height, so no, that's not as tall. But that was pretty much the biggest thing that I heard, So I think
that's a win.
I think that's a win. I think that's a win because they share the story, they have the film, they share it, they post it in social media. Like when they heard that I was coming here, they were the first ones like sharing the whole thing. So they're grateful that his father's story is being told. In a way, it's like a way to to give him that recognition that he deserves.
That he deserves, absolutely should not be a footnote in history.
Exactly.
I love the synergy between both of your projects and the fact that both films deal with religion and science. Jason, could you talk a little bit about it? I mean, you touched on how Sean was interested in kind of like, I think escalating kind of the tension by setting this film with the Hasidic Jewish community. Can you talk about the development of your project in balancing religion and science and outreach to the community?
Absolutely. That was probably the most difficult part about the whole writing process, especially because it's a community that's so insular, and it's hard sometimes to get people to talk to us, honestly about their experiences. The moment that they would hear about what the subject matter was, they didn't really want to sort of entertain it, just because the notion that even this character would entertain, doing blasphemous sort of things was, essentially problematic. However, it's cool. In there's like, oh man, now you're making me like really go back into my memory. But there are certain aspects in the community. It was called Cholin. Cholin is what they called it. It was this guy, Isaac. He was a Hasidic Jew, but he ran this it was like a once a month gathering that would happen in different places, and it was an opportunity for people in the community to they would always have like a different speaker or something. It was kind of a place where you could sort of have one foot in and one foot out and entertain, or they'd listen to vinyl and listen to share music and stuff like that. And so Sean would kind of go to these once a month and try and sort of meet people who were in the community and be like, can you read my script, and can you please validate some of this information for me and stuff like that. And that was really cool. But in regards to how that melded with the science, I think one of the coolest things that came out for us was that we came to discover that Kabbalic mysticism has kind of a science to it in itself. When it comes to the process of decomposition, there's this belief that the soul is still very much attached to the body even while it's decomposing. It's leaving it sort of very slowly, the neshama, as it's called. But how long it takes precisely for any one body to decompose is dependent on the number of sins that the body has. And the longer it is taking to decompose, the more torture, literally, the body and the soul is going through. So for our character, it becomes a really, balancing that becomes a huge crisis for him, to really discover, okay, how long is it taking my wife, to decompose, and is she literally suffering through this? So yeah, it was really kind of interesting always just sort of having to see what the science told us, and then kind of look at it from the religious perspective and sort of ask, okay, what does this mean for the character and his stakes? And ultimately, I mean, that he comes up with a scientific solution. One of the things I think we're really, really proud of, and we're adamant when we were making the film, was that this wasn't a story about a man who is leaving his community. This isn't a story about a man who's losing his faith. On the contrary, it's actually about a man whose faith is being restored by the science and by his experiences that he has. So he actually does end up coming back to his community, even though he does something quite blasphemous, which is he digs up his wife's body and finds a new place to bury her. But But all of that, yeah, I mean, that stuff was actually really interesting. He digs her up. We had no idea I remember even up until like filming it, we had different science advisors who were debating like the condition of which this body would be in, and like, could you technically lift a body up, or would there have to be like a tarp element to sort of, carry whatever. Interestingly, when you are like, after like, a certain number of feet, like 6 feet under, all of the elements basically stop being a factor, and so it takes a lot longer. So you actually stay intact for an extremely long time if you're buried deep enough and if you're well protected enough. Then again, if you're in one of those like sealed like coffins where it's like no air is allowed to escape, then most likely your body explodes because all the gases that start to get released, there's nowhere for it to go, and so that was something else that we learned. All of this, thank you, Sloan, like really, really cool things to like dig into and morbid things to look at, but yeah.
I feel like this is a good segue to kind of head into the making of the film, I feel, in touching it. So, you had started the development process back 2013-14. You had some tremendous financial support, and in addition to the science support from the Sloan Foundation. When did you actually go into the making of your film?
It was actually surprisingly quick, and I don't expect any film to ever go that way for us again. Actually, that's being proven actually right now. But anyways, we were lucky because we'd won the $100,000, and we thought that was it. We were going to shoot it that summer. It was going to be a little black and white film, just us in the woods and a pig or whatever. And then we also applied for the Tribeca. Sloan, rest in peace, Tribeca Institute, but they were really awesome, and I think actually somebody had maybe a similar experience. Somebody in the judges panel decided that they really loved the project and wanted to come on as producers. That was Emily Mortimer and Alessandro Nivola. Always grateful to them, and so that really just kind of got the whole thing snowballing. And I think we were shooting we shot the summer of 2016, I want to say it was, and then also we received.
Did you ever expect Matthew Broderick to be the star of your film?
No, not at all. Well, it started first with Geza Rohrig, who we're really fortunate to get for this. He plays Shmuel, and then
did he come from Sean's monthly meetings at the?
No. He came referred to from Sean's mentor, Dylan at Sony Pictures. They had just done Son of Saul. And so the movie hadn't actually been released yet, and they were like, you should come take a look at this actor, you should take a look at this film. And it was, I don't know if anyone's seen Son of Saul, but you can imagine it's a really weird kind of experience of watching that film and thinking like, can this guy do comedy? But Sean saw something in the way that man stumbles through this concentration camp that he just immediately was like so Chaplin-esque. And he knew that he could do a lot of the physical stuff with the dragging of the pig and everything. So that's how Geza came involved. And then Matthew, who's amazing and such an generous, warm. Feel so bad the stuff that we had to put him through, and that he tolerated from us. He was just a godsend. I love him.
Rommel, do you want to talk a little bit about the making of your film?
We got very lucky because we were able to film on location in Mexico, which was beautiful. I think after having experienced all these kind of like stereotypes, I wanted to make this film as authentic as possible, and even like talking about like including a lot of Mexican crew, and all the actors needed to be Mexican, in my opinion. As I said, I'm Bolivian, so it was important to me to be as authentic as possible, meaning that I wanted to have producers also that were Mexican, And so one of my producers, Andrea Porras, she was incredible with all the connections that we were able to get over there. It was just amazing to see how, after writing letters or telling people over there in Mexico about the scientists and the story that we wanted to tell, that they would just be like, here is my house. If you need like to house a couple of crew members, you can do it for sure. And the locations, it was just easier to get them, and film permits work differently over there than they work over here. You know, there are many things that were just easier, and in a way, with the grant that we had, we were able to go through the entire production over there in Mexico. But if we had shot it here, that would not have been possible, I don't think. Like with all the permits and etc. that we need, LA can be incredibly expensive. We tried, you know, we even did auditions over here, but it was just hard for us to find like actors that would whose Spanish would sound realistic enough. You know, there was too much accent that we were getting, so it became very, very difficult in that sense. That's why it was just kind of like meant to be able to film in Mexico, and the production itself was maybe 9 days, and it ended up, we filmed like as much as possible because we didn't have enough budget to come back for pickups, you know? And I know that we definitely maybe overshot some things here and there. I just wanted to make sure that we got everything, you know? And I remember that the first cut was an hour, and this is supposed to be a short film, you know?
I was going to ask about that because your final running time is about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
so.
it's about 30 minutes, yeah. So, I mean, it was definitely a lot, you know, but we had
But
enough.
it's still amazing for, I mean, we were just talking about this beforehand. I mean, the grant that you received was a little over $20,000, and the scope of your final film is really quite stunning and cinematic, and impressive for what you were able to do at that budget range. And you certainly touched on the fact that, you know, doing everything in Mexico, your dollar peso goes a lot further.
Yeah.
But 9 days to get everything that you had. Now, I guess the fact that you overshot, I'm curious, what was your final script? Did you expect to have a longer short going into this process?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the first draft was 16 pages, and then right before production, the script became like a 25-page script. So it wasn't that short, as you know, but I was okay with it. I was happy with it. I thought my producers, the team, were okay with it. I didn't anticipate it being like all pretty much 30 minutes, you know. But when we were editing, it got to a point where we were like, it just cannot be shorter, otherwise it would like hurt the story, you know. So, and I had heard from so many wise people, you know, that the shorter the short, the better, you know, to be accepted at festivals and stuff like that. Some people told me, can you make it 15 minutes? And I was like, I can't, I'm sorry, you know. Even though I was like warned that it wouldn't, you know, make it in many festivals. But to me, it was more about the story and respecting the emotional journey, and to be able to go through that in like only 15 minutes, that was just not possible, you know. So I was okay with maybe getting a few rejections here and there, but it ended up paying off big time.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll get to that as well.
Even with the feature, they hound you about those 15 minutes.
They do?
Yeah, it's depressing.
time limits, fitting into screening times and programming expectations. So actually, this is for both of you. You touched actually earlier on when you were speaking about your science advisor and how amazing she was with regards to really setting the table. And so you think about advisors really kind of coming in with the technical knowledge, but the way that you spoke about it was actually really about setting the visual table of like how the science would appear visually in the film, which is really exciting. And we see it at the beginning of your short film. Did you know that that was always going to be part of, how you shot, the incorporation of that, or did that come from your conversations with your advisor?
A lot of it come from the conversations with the advisor, because I had done a lot of research, and not only myself but my production designer as well, and I wanted to show how he would work, how Luis Miramontes was working in the lab, how he looked, what things he was looking through the microscope, but the things, for example, the things that he was looking through the microscope, I remember that I did more like searches, like Google searches of like the things that I wish I would watch, and not necessarily focusing on what should be accurate for the science, So I just found these like very nice, like moving microscopic progesterone like hormones that I thought this looks amazing and visually cool. And then I met Raquel Arias, Dr. Raquel, and she was like, yeah, that's not accurate. Or she was, I mean, she agreed. She was like, it looks very cool, you know? So in a way, part of me was like, I almost kind of want to convince her, can we use this, you know? But that was just the younger visual me, just wanting to show something cool. So having her especially was the mentorship that I needed was there, you know? Because she was like, she was able to see what I was trying to accomplish, and she guided me towards like the correct route, you know, making sure that I respected, that we all respected the way that science should be portrayed, even though it's being fictionalized, you know. So she helped me find like the samples of endometrium that we show in the film, and that are definitely more accurate, even though they are not like moving images, you know, but they are
Still
images
cool.
nonetheless, and it's very cool to see things under the microscope. So yeah, it was we joined forces there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jason, I'm curious, when you wrote this script, like you have some interesting animation sequences of the decomposition. Could you talk a little bit, was that always the intention or something that you discovered along the way? And
We knew that the idea of the film was to sort of stare these things in the face. So we knew that there was going to be some sort of and that he has these nightmares. So we wanted a visual representation of that. So we landed on stop motion animation, which just, I think has such a tangible kind of look. I mean, it was actually kind of a cool process because we knew he wanted him to have nightmares. It was all going to start with this image of a toe that was going to sort of like start to peel off. And as we would do research and find out sort of different aspects about it, you know, we realized the character would be learning this too. Basically, the concept of, you know, like the stage in which insects get involved and all this stuff. So there was this cool thing where we sort of realized, oh, like as he gets more information, the dreams would become slightly more accurate, or just whatever little tidbit he had maybe added. So that was something kind of cool that we worked with a science advisor who would then look at our sort of the stop motion stuff that we were doing and sort of, you know, nitpick for accuracy. I mean, some of it's like it blooms into a flower, so it's like actually impossible. But a lot of it was like, oh, you know, the color on this vein would actually be a little bit more in this shade, or you would have, you know, there was a lot of interesting sort of notes that she had in terms of just, what the body would look like at that stage.
let's talk about getting the film out into the world. You finished these, it's always so difficult. For To Dust, you premiered at Tribeca. And then won the Audience Award, which was very exciting. And that was kind of your first, I'm assuming, audience. Like, how did you feel? What the reception was? What was the feedback?
That first one was really, really awesome. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be a big hit. And then a bunch of other screenings that showed all the other perspectives of people with, you know. I mean, it's a tough film. It's an interesting film, and it deals with subject matter that I think a lot of people aren't used to talking about or don't like to talk about, or they think it's like somehow morbid and depressing and actually like very negative to talk about these things. But Sean and I really believe that there's something actually beautiful and celebratory about life in it. And we were really, really validated by the fact that, you know, it was a lot of people in the Hasidic community who managed to somehow see this film or get out there and look at it, who would come to us and say, thank you so much for making this film. Ironically, then we had a lot of people who were Reformed Jewish who would come to me and say, shame on you for telling this, and, you know, you should leave them alone, and, you know, like, you know, how dare you, you know, write this character who decides to sort of, you know, go off the rails. But I think, yeah, you know, you end up finding its champions, and it certainly definitely had its champions. Sloan always being one of them. We had a distribution grant, I think, as well.
Thanks to Film Independent.
Thank you to Film
And
Independent.
Sloan
Yes, thank you
Foundation.
to Film Independent and Sloan and everyone. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, I'm kind of curious, did you have an expectation of who your audience would be for this film? What you wanted it to be, and then what the actuality was?
Yeah. Actually, so all that stuff's really interesting. I mean, as you're trying to sell the film, or pitch the film even and get money for it, you know, you're always trying to sort of let people know who the audience is. And Sean and I really thought that this film was for like people our age, or anybody who's a fan of film and dark humor. If you like the Coen brothers, that's somebody who we really look up to, and it's sort of what we were going for. But we thought somehow that we were younger and hipper than we actually, I guess, were, because eventually, the distributor was like, no, we want to really target the Jewish community, the senior citizen community, I guess, because they all need to think about death or whatever. But I don't know. I don't think it was the right approach personally. I thought it had a much broader audience that I think that we could have easily, approached had we actually given it. I think it's fair due. But that's the stuff that happened. All of this is always like, you never know. You never know how people are going to respond. It's in some ways an experiment. Distribution. There's so many different routes in which you can go. We were lucky. We were in I want to say we ended up getting 3,000 theaters, but it was a very slow kind of like a release. I mean, it would be in New York first, and then it kind of made its way eventually to like Florida. I went to a screening floor. I thought they were going to love it down there. I was ripped apart.
Although love or hate, to get such strong reactions,
yeah,
I
feel like
it's really exciting for debate and conversation.
Exactly. That's honestly, I think the most rewarding thing about making this film are the debates that come up, and that every once in a while you still hear. And Sean, thank God, always shares with me like the random email from someone who says like somehow weirdly I found this film and it helped me process the grief, with a loved one or something like that. So yeah, that's the best part.
And you got nominated for a Spirit Award, too.
And that wasn't too bad either, yeah.
Not too bad. Rommel, so you made this film. How did you get the film out into the world, knowing that it was a longer run time, might be more limited in festival premiere? What happened for you?
Yeah, many things happened. So we finished post-production, everything, like in March 2020, which is right when the lockdown happened. So that already was something new and scary, but the festival run continued, like we just wanted to send it to festivals and see where it could go. And I mean, some people that had advised me were definitely right, because we were very happy with the film, and we had screened it at the USC right before the lockdown, and we got like great response from people, from the audience, that really liked the film, that didn't find it too long or boring, all of great feedback. So that excited me and my team, we were like, okay, we are ready. Even though we are in the pandemic and in the lockdown, we are still gonna submit it to places. And it was like rejection after rejection after rejection. But funny enough, just getting like great feedback from the people that were rejecting us. So I felt like, like these relationships where they're like, no, it's not you, it's me, And I was like, well, if it's you, you can change your mind. Thank you. Yeah, I do that sometimes. No, I'm kidding. But anyways, I mean, I was discouraged in a point, like after getting all these like rejections, I was like, can you just tell me what didn't work for you? It's okay if you say the duration is too long. I don't know, whatever it is, but getting all good feedback, but rejection is kind of like confusing, And then we got a Student Academy Award in 2020. So that was cool.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. So like being able to meet, even though it was virtual, being able to meet like Spike Lee and get the news and the award was one of the most fulfilling things that I got out of this, and that was in a way kind of like the starting point for the rest of the festival run for it, because we were able to get some distribution from Shorts TV and FanCat and Omeletto on YouTube, and yesterday we got some like distribution offer from Short of the Year, like a huge European chain that they work with TV networks over there and online platforms. So after that, it's been nothing but good things for the film, thankfully.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And just so if people haven't seen it, so where can everyone see your films right now?
Well, Sweet Potatoes, we are screening it tomorrow here.
No, that's
so.
right. There you go. Well, you got that. If you're telling your friends and family, where else can they see it?
Well, it's you can find it on Omeletto. It's like they have their YouTube page, and it's for free for now. So you can
Worth
find
sharing.
it there.
Worth sharing.
Yes,
And yes.
that's very true. Thank you.
Yes.
Sonia.
And then Jason.
Also, any special shout out to Sonia Epstein at
Yes.
Momi.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Sonia.
You're amazing.
You were a huge help with To Dust as well and its life, so thank you for that. To Dust now, I think you can find it probably on iTunes and Amazon and those. I don't think it's on an actual streaming service anymore. Canopy,
Canopy is great.
someone said. Yeah, I
You
think
just
it's
need a
still in
library
Canopy. But otherwise, I mean, rent it too. That helps us.
Yes, absolutely.
Buy it.
And then, just moving forward, what's next? And I'm curious how your relationship with Sloan has impacted how you move forward in your own creative work and what's to come.
We're in the Sloan business now, clearly, with the futurists. See if second time's a charm. No,
But that's kind of exciting when you you didn't think about science in your work probably before this at all, right?
No, not at all, not at all. And I mean, I still don't really consider myself much of a science person, but like I said, I think the opportunity to like dig into, these different subjects and research is fascinating. It's kind of like why I got into writing in the first place, I think, was to sort of get away from my life and to jump into somebody else's, into the different world. So I'm eternally grateful for Sloan. I think you guys all saw it. Like, I've been to other events like this where it's not just science-based stories, it's kind of anything that you want, and you hear so much of the same stuff over and over again. And I don't know about you guys, but I just thought this was like the most unique lineup of stories. So we've got, we tried some other projects. They're out there. I don't know, I think they're sort of circling. But the nice thing is the biggest momentum we've got going on right now is the Futurist. And thanks to Sloan, we were able to meet, I don't know if I still can say his name here because this is being streamed, but whatever. But anyways, he's amazing. And now I'm losing my train of thought. Just thank you, Sloan. Thank you.
Amazing. Rommel?
Well, before making this Sloan project, I think my stories were more, like I love magical realism, I still do that, and my projects talk a little bit about that, and I also love like Latinx and queer stories. I'm queer myself, but I never thought I would be so passionate about like stories that are based in real life events and historical stories and science stories. And ironically, my undergrad is in systems engineering, which I really...
You can use more tech stories, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, but in a way for me, I was like trying to take a step back from that because I wanted to do more filmmaking, and I was in a way drawn back to it, but in a better way because now I'm able to merge both, and to make more projects. So making Sweet Potatoes encouraged me to learn more about like stories about these misrepresented people and their work that they have done that have changed the world. So I recently finished like writing a feature by this Argentinian scientist, who used like a fingerprinting system. And I learned that Sloan actually funded a short film for it, So I know that there is like future for this like feature that hopefully I'll be talking to Sloan and Film Independent about. And just like I found, thanks to Sloan, I found love to stories that are based on real life events and like stories that are based in books, and in real people. So it's exciting.
We're grateful to the Sloan Foundation too. With that, thank you, Jason and Rommel, for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you so much.